everyone, and welcome to another episode of From No Crypto to No Crypto. I'm your host, the crypto coach, Blockchain Wayne. Today we're joined by Nick Lambert. Now, Nick is with Doc.io. Nick's going to tell us a lot about that. But Nick, first and foremost, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Wayne. It's a real pleasure.
Awesome, man. I am definitely looking forward to getting into this conversation. A lot of what I saw when I reviewed Doc is a lot of utility, and there's a need in the market for what you guys do, a need in business for what you guys do. So before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, Nick.
Probably the important stuff, Wayne, is likely that I kind of got into I guess technology companies is really where I've been based most of my time, but really got into my aha moment with crypto was probably kind of late 2013. I was working for a decentralized storage startup, and we were looking for an incentivization mechanism. And so this company, they basically is a bit like what Filecoin does. People at home contribute their computing power, hard drive space, etc., and are paid in some way from this network. And we were trying to figure out, like, how do we do this thing? Why will people want to turn on their computers at home and basically provide resources to this network? And we looked around, and of course, Bitcoin was one of the earliest examples, the Bitcoin network, of a way that it incentivized miners for their hashing power and running that network. And so that led us to down the rabbit hole, or certainly for me at least, into the rabbit hole of, wow, you can also do cross-border payments. Wow, this blockchain thing's really interesting. And it really started to hit home how significant it was from there. So. And then really since then, I've been involved in the decentralized or Web3 or crypto space, whatever you want to call it. And now I find myself as at Doc.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've heard it explained like that, but that's a simple way to explain how the Bitcoin network operates and the incentive structure, because most people say I like blockchain without crypto or vice versa. You know, they think it's one or the other, but you've got to incentivize the network, right?
Yeah, you can as well. I mean, you start to get into the kind of corporate world, Wayne, and what we see a little bit in some of our work is a desire for like private chains. So certainly with public chains like Ethereum and like Bitcoin, you definitely need that incentivization mechanism, because otherwise, why would people go to the effort? What we do see in private chains is companies running the nodes themselves without an incentivization structure, but they kind of have to manage those relationships with contracts and stuff. So certainly right to say it makes life a lot easier to have those incentivizations already built in.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, businesses are already expecting or working in a network cost into their infrastructure. So putting that cost structure into something that could be more secure, to where, you know, they're worried about uptime a lot of times. So if downtime for them is bad, so if one server goes down and your whole network doesn't operate, versus you've got an agreement with several other, or you're running it, even if you have multiple locations of your own business, one location goes offline, the network continues to operate.
Exactly. Yeah, redundancy is a huge thing for decentralized networks. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, awesome, cool. So Nick, great info. Let's jump into Doc and tell us at its core, what is Doc?
Of course. So a big problem that we all see today, Wayne, is how do we trust the data around us? Like we see, like, you know, the kind of word fake news seem to appear kind of like mid 2010s, I guess, and really since then it's plagued us. And so we don't really know what we can trust online is a big issue. And another issue from that, as a business, we don't really know, like if we are getting, let's say, hiring for a new job, and candidates start to apply and they say, like, I've got a degree from Harvard, a degree from Berkeley. Sometimes like that information, sometimes you take it at its word, but then you have to sometimes verify that. And that process, it sucks because it's slow and it's expensive. So that might require me to hire a company to do that, or I might take the step of actually phoning one of those institutions to find out, did Joe Bloggs go there? That costs me, you know, many days, and it slows down the recruitment process. So Doc really exists to provide a way for businesses to make claims about data. It could be about an individual's educational attainment, like a degree. And then when that information exists in this digital verifiable credential, the recipient of that can instantly verify it. So really what we're doing is getting rid of all the hassle around verifying data, and also enabling people to make claims that we can trust is really what we're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very interesting, because I think about that, and I think about, honestly, I lead a remote force, and most of the people that I've interviewed, I've and hired, actually, I've taken their credentials at their word. There's really, I don't reach out to that college and say, hey, do you have this degree, or show me the degree. We do take a lot of it at our word, obviously. I've been in, prior to even running a remote force, I've been in the corporate management space for 24 years prior. So it was kind of, there obviously there's background checks and stuff, but there's definitely times where we've hired people and you have to question, okay, are those credentials real?
Exactly. And even if in your role, like in the roles that we both play, Wayne, like that could be a situation that's a pain that like you might hire the wrong person and think, well, that's not so good because, the person turned out to be pretty terrible for what I wanted. They weren't sufficiently trained or knowledgeable. So I'll get rid of them and I'll go hire someone else. But if you then think about what if I'm in the field of hiring medical practitioners or some kind of health and safety thing where I'm trusting that somebody knows how to work a harness at 100 feet in the air because they're repairing telecoms towers or something. If you start to get that fraud happening in those types of places, like that's when like lives are lost and when businesses get sued and compliance becomes an issue. So for you and I, it's probably a significant issue, but not really life threatening. But in other trades, it really becomes a big factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was funny. I was listening to a comedian the other day, and I forgot which airline he was talking about, but the airline CEO had said something about they were going to push their hiring focus for pilots on, and he named some different qualifications that had nothing related to being able to fly that plane. And the comedian was like, wouldn't you think the most qualified person to fly the plane is who you would want? But yeah, I mean, it's definitely important. It's just, kind of emphasizing those roles that can be life or death, can be even cause someone financial ruin if you don't have proper validation. Looking at Doc, there's quite a few solutions on the website when I was looking at it. What are some interesting use cases you guys have seen emerge? I'm sure there's always those things where you think, okay, this is how it could be used. Just like our protocol, somebody does something, you're like, oh, I never thought about using it like that.
Yeah, a really good one that we see, and it might be relevant to kind of crypto audience, are things like the industry talks about it a lot, or our industry does, so it's a little bit cliched, but just in case your listeners aren't aware, things like reusable KYC is a great use case. So, if we are on exchanges and trading crypto, whatever, you will likely have multiple exchange accounts, and that's simply because you don't necessarily want to be tied to one way, or it could be because there are different pairs that maybe some exchanges have that others don't have that you want. And so we end up in a bit of a mess where we have a situation where every time we want to go to an exchange account, particularly in the US where you're based, and then you would need to verify your account, you have to go through KYC. And that process is terrible. It probably takes about 15 minutes. Half the time it doesn't work. But you have to go through it again and again and again with different exchanges. But a great use case is, imagine you could go through that KYC process once with an identity verification provider, an IDV that everyone trusts or subscribes to their service. So I go through that process and they issue me with a credential that basically says the types of things that would be on that identity verification request. Now, if I go to a new exchange, instead of going through that horrific process again, I can just send them my credential over that says Onfido or Jumio or one of these other IDVs had actually verified me, that they know who I am, they know where I live, and I can now come onto your platform. All you would have to do is send that credential off. You would overnight, revolutionize that industry. The onboarding rates would go through the roof, and we would get a much better experience as users. So reusable KYC is a commonly cited use case because it's such a really good, powerful one.
Yeah, man. I think about that in 2017 was really, we saw the ICO craze, right? And a lot of things were happening, and I was finding myself doing KYC on all these different exchanges to be able to get to those trading pairs. You're right. Like, okay, this is only on these exchanges, so let me make an account there. And most people just do it without thinking. But the whole time I'm thinking, I wasn't comfortable with it because each one of these platforms that I KYC on, I'm giving them my sensitive personal data, my name, my birth date, my things that can be used to steal my identity in bad stewards. And the whole point of decentralization is we don't have to trust one entity. And anytime you see, I look back at all these retailers. Think about like retailers like I know here in the U.S. like Target, Home Depot, and others. They've all had data breaches where their users' sensitive information have been breached. So anytime there's a honeypot per se of information that hackers want to target, they're going to go after it. And that's what all these exchanges were creating. And now I think about it, I mean, some of those exchanges now are defunct. So what happened with their data? You could even have the people that run the exchange, if they're bad actors, when they go down, they could be like, okay, now we're going to sell our users' data to make one last final exit. And just being able to verify without that is definitely
exactly. You can control your own data, like you say. It resides with the space that Docker in. I mean, we're putting a lot of these decentralized identifiers that an individual is responsible for, and all these credentials that I mentioned, which are basically just kind of claims that are made that potentially can contain identity stuff. That all resides with you in your own wallet that you control the private keys to. So, like you say, there is no honeypot there. It's just a case of one individual managing their own wallet. They can back that wallet up in case they lose it, but it really does change that power struggle between the company effectively owning your data and trying to manage it or mismanage it, like you mentioned, or you can control it yourself, which is really what Web3 is all about, after all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about it. I mentioned before we started the interview here, the recording. I live in Louisiana in the United States, and we just got notified that the Office of Motor Vehicles here has been compromised. So all of our data is out there, and really, that's just I guess that's the. I guess I've heard, we also talked about Andreas Antonopoulos before. I followed him for a long time, and he mentioned that there's two types of centralized entities that control your data like that, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked.
Yes, it's going to happen.
Nick, tell us a little bit more about, I noticed when I looked at the site, there's a Web3 identity layer, Docs Web3 identity layer. Can you explain what that is and how that works?
Yeah, of course. Many of us will be using tools that we're not necessarily aware of what's happening behind the scenes. So one of the things that we use a lot today is something called open authorization, or OAuth. And we use it, actually, you will see it listed as things like sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook is most often. And those services were really smart at solving a UX problem, because before that, those different sign-in mechanisms came along. We all had like 1 million usernames and passwords for each and every individual site we went to. And unless you used a password manager, it was just a mess. And so if you're a little bit lazy, or you value convenience, you might click sign in with Google, and you can use your Google login, which you only need to remember one of, and you can access multiple sites. The issue with that is Google basically know everything that happens after that point. So they know what sites you're going to, how long you're there, like all the pages you're looking at, etc. And so what we are doing with Web3 ID is a way for that same convenience to exist, where you can literally log in our case, log in with Web3 ID. But instead of that information, where you go after that, all of that stuff, that's not logged or known by anyone. So behind the scenes, we would issue you with a credential that you sign yourself. You use it to log into whatever service supports sign in with Web3 ID. And then that gets thrown away. And then you can go on your way and do what you want, and nobody is able to track you. So what we're trying to do with it is give you a cool Web3 way of giving you better user experience, but also keeping you kind of secure as well. So you're still getting access to these sites, but you're not giving away what you're up to, and you don't have to remember like a username and a password.
Yeah, man, you are so right. I think, again, I'm one of those that I don't really feel comfortable with the use Google login, but I'll be honest, I've used it from time to time, right? You're
Yeah,
trying to be efficient, trying to jump from one to another. Let me just sign in with this. Let's just do it,
exactly.
right?
But I think, and then you're not alone, Wayne, in doing that. Like, I mean, I do it as well, even though I should know better. But sometimes you're just in a rush, and unfortunately, like we're humans, and part of the human condition is we're a little bit lazy, and yeah, sometimes you just want to get things done as conveniently as possible, and then we'll take those shortcuts. So yeah, I don't think you're alone in doing that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So we've talked about some different use cases for doc. What about, I would think in healthcare, that would be something. Is there a use case for doc in the
It
healthcare
is.
industry?
Yeah, there's a couple actually, Wayne, I could talk about. One might be the holy grail, I suppose, is getting to a point where you can manage your own health records. So and it's probably not the technology that holds that back. It's more the legals and the kind of different markets. So like in the US, where I know you're based, like it's a very fragmented healthcare system that runs different from state to state. And sorting all that stuff out is going to take quite a lot of time. The UK is a little bit different. It's a lot more centralized. There's really just one public provider. But it's still tricky. But ultimately, you could get to a point where we could each hold our medical records as credentials in a wallet. And so the idea would be that you might go to your general practitioner, your GP's surgery, and you might know you've got an appointment. And they might say, look, I want to access your medical records so that when we're discussing whatever ailment you have, I have some backgrounds. And so they might make a request to you in your wallet, and you would say, yeah, that's fine. I'm going to see Dr. Jones. I'm going to give them access to this part of my medical records. And then you can interact, and then you can remove their access at the end. So that's a really powerful one that I think we'll see in the future, but I think is a little way off. The other one that we see, Wayne, is actually more around the workforce part. So if you're a medical practitioner working almost anywhere in the world, if you move your location either from state to state in the US or even different parts of the UK where I'm based, you need to go through a manual verification of your licenses and your competencies. And so that can often be an in-person meeting many months in advance. You need to take all of the material that you have, and it can take the administrators of that health service, many more months to actually sign you off as compliant in case they get sued or something like that. But imagine as a healthcare practitioner, you had some kind of national body award you with all your licenses and credentials, and you showed up for work the day that you wanted to work somewhere else, and you literally showed them your credentials, you presented your credentials, and they said, yeah, I can instantly verify those. I know who issued them to you. I know they were issued to you because they're all cryptographically signed, like any kind of crypto transaction. And I'm comfortable that you have those licenses, and then you can start work immediately. So I think that's one of the use cases that we're seeing that potentially could happen quite quickly.
Awesome. Yeah. Nick, this really excites me. I've always been a big fan of things that really show people utility and how this technology can be used in the real world, other than just obviously finance and money is important, but it's not everything, right? There's so much more that you can do than just to have a cryptocurrency that's on chain that you can use to pay for things. Being able to have this type of technology utilized, and it's solving problems. It's not just saying, okay, we're taking it from a centralized system to a decentralized system, but it is solving real world problems, efficiencies. That's really what we need to see. Now, I do have a question. I don't want to go too deep on the tech because I know a lot of our listeners are just trying to learn about the cryptocurrency and blockchain space and how it can be utilized. But my one question is, those credentials you talk about, how are they stored? Is it just a transaction on chain, or is it in essence like an NFT that someone would have in their wallet?
Yeah, so it's you don't actually need to put any part of the credential on chain. So you could send me, let's say you wanted to send me like proof of attendance, like I've attended your podcast, Wayne. You could send me a credential, and all that need to go on chain is actually your DID, your issuer profile, we would call that. So you would basically say, look, I'm Wayne and I'm sending this over, but the credential itself can go through like some encrypted route, or it could be sent in some kind of file through an email service. But basically nothing needs to go on chain apart from your public ID. and that's it. And then these are stored potentially in what we'd advocate for is the individual's wallet. So like any off-exchange crypto wallet, so like whether it's a MetaMask or something else, but a wallet where it's potentially an app on your phone, it could be a desktop app, but something where you're controlling the private keys and nobody else can actually access that wallet without you giving them access. And so that's really where they would be stored, and only you would potentially have access to them, which is what gives it that security and gives the user the autonomy that's so important in this space.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense because you wouldn't want all of that. If there's an NFT in my wallet, anybody can see it. So
Yeah,
maybe like a college diploma wouldn't be bad, a college degree, having that as an NFT that's
yeah,
non-transferable in your wallet. But yeah, some of that other data, you're right, it
yeah.
doesn't need to be.
The only issue with NFTs, and there's a thing that you may have heard, and I don't know if this is like slightly more advanced than you'd want, but there's a discussion around, I think Vitalik, obviously the founder of Ethereum, he calls them soul-bound NFTs,
Yes.
which you talk about identity, and so being linked to one user exclusively, and like you say, they can't transfer them, they can't sell them, they can't do anything. The only issue that can cause is, for the most part, a lot of that information is on chain. So it's fine if that NFT is not having, like, let's say, lots of personally identifiable or PII information, but in
Yeah,
many cases, it's putting a lot of data on chain that doesn't always need to be there. So
sure.
soul-bound tokens definitely have a good use case. I'm not always convinced they're the best for like identity type things.
Right. Unless there's some kind of privacy layer.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
you'd
because
have
I
to.
know that they're able to add unlockable content to an NFT to where only the owner can see
Yep.
that. But yeah, you're right. That definitely causes some things. Now, concert tickets or sport events tickets as NFTs, those are
Yeah.
great because it's almost like a social aspect. After you've gone to that concert or sporting event, you've got the
Yeah.
ticket in your wallet as kind of like memorabilia. But yeah, you're
Exactly.
right. Personal data, you don't
Yeah.
want to you
And
don't
it
want
could
to
also be
store
like
that.
they're good for like loyalty schemes as well. Like you say, so if you go to something or you go to an event and like it could be anything from like a Nike shoe event, and then they might want to reward you and say, well, here's an NFT and that actually can entitle you to money off. But what they could actually, your next set of sneakers, but what they can actually do is make sure you can't transfer that. So instead
Yeah.
of like these benefits getting passed around users that maybe Nike doesn't want, they can actually make sure that you're the one that benefits. So there's a lot of different awesome use cases for that type of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're speaking my language. One of the things that we've put a focus on recently is educating business owners and business professionals how to utilize this technology in their day-to-day business. And NFTs is kind of where there's the biggest uphill battle because NFTs got such a bad rap from all the hype
Yeah.
and the scams. I mean, anything in general, but the technology is amazing. And that's one thing I teach is loyalty rewards or memberships. We did an event last week in New Orleans and we gave all the attendees a POAP NFT. Now, we haven't added any utility to it, but if I wanted to do something, I could always drop a code or something for those people to redeem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely
Yeah.
where we need to see it going.
And see what you're describing there is when like we see this a lot as well. Like one of the kind of biggest barriers that we see to adoption, and we kind of like talked already today about lots of like clear benefits, and like you talk obviously sounds like you're also talking to business owners as well. A lot of the time, the difficulties they have are like almost imagined, or it's down to like bad press around like CryptoKitties, NFTs, crypto more generally being a place where it's just scammers. And the
Right.
reality is there's scammers for sure, but there's plenty of scammers going on in the the fiat system as well. Banks are losing billions a year. So it's definitely frustrating that you have this amazing technology that's totally neutral. Like technology doesn't do bad and good. It's the people that do bad and good. And it's putting them off, like trying to harness this stuff. So it sounds like probably you and I go through similar
Yeah.
difficulties when we're trying to get businesses and people aware of the technology and how they can use it.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, really, that was a conversation I had 2 days ago with somebody, business owner in New Orleans. And he's like, "There's so many scams." I was like, "Yes, there's," and same thing like you. There's scams everywhere, right? And I said, and the benefit of having open, decentralized technologies where anybody can use it, anybody can also create a scam. But also, what you see is that's what's being highlighted right now in the media and stuff are the scams. Until we start focusing on real world utility, how can you use it? How does it really solve a problem? And I'm sure you've probably heard this before many times with multiple speakers in the space is not everything needs to be on chain. Not everything needs to be on a blockchain. If you don't just do it to say, okay, we're doing this on a blockchain. No. How does that solve a real need? What problems does that resolve, or how does it improve efficiencies? And I think once we get there, we'll see where we can highlight utility more than just speculation and in essence, I call it degenerative gambling, where people just throw money at it. Then you'll see the space get a lot more positive attention. But it's going to always happen. There's always going to be scams. There's still the Nigerian prince scam that was going on for what I think 3-4 decades now. It's still going on, but more and more people are aware of it, understand it. It's not as effective as it was in the early days. Now they're getting more elaborate with scams, even outside of crypto. I used to see all the time people running it that were getting scammed on the phone, and they were thinking they had to go to these stores, retailers, and buy gift cards to pay either the IRS or to help get a family member out of jail that they heard was in trouble. So scams just they typically pop up where in any technology where people can prey on people's ignorance.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I heard about that. Obviously, that's a Nigerian prince thing but I heard it was on the news the other day, and it was talking about how like modern credit cards and banks are basically, you're insured against those types of things. So, and they basically said you're as well as a user, like running the odds and basically sending that money to the Nigerian prince. So you send him the $1,000, he sends you like 10 Bitcoin back, because for the most part, you'll always get your money back. And maybe there's one time in a million that he's actually genuinely a Nigerian prince looking for that $1,000. So, it was quite funny, but it does show you like, these things have been around for such a long time, but we're, in some cases we're insured against them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so that's until we focus more on utility, we've got to pretty much overshadow the scams. We can't just say, oh, the scams are going to go away. We're going to educate more people, because scammers rely on ignorance of people to where they don't really understand how something is, and that's where they're more apt to give someone their money. And then two, highlight the utility instead of just, I had someone the other day hit me up, and they were telling me over the phone, I think it was last week, that they were launching a token and they were going to build this NFT marketplace and that. I'm like, how is that different from what's out there? Yeah. Like, let's focus on utility. What can you do that's different, that differentiates you in the market? And it looks like what you guys have done at Doc is that you've taken the technology and shown people how it can solve real world problems.
Yeah, I mean, crypto is very, very powerful, and there is a lot you can do with it. And it's right that, what you're describing as well, because one thing we try and avoid, and I'm definitely not saying we've got this nailed down, but it's something we do try and focus on, is we quite often see people in our industry talk when they're trying to say how they're different. In the example you gave, Wayne, they might just start giving you technobabble or saying it's decentralized or it uses a blockchain, but for the most part, businesses, investors, people, they actually don't care. They just want to know, why should I care? What different benefits does it give me? So for a lot of the time, we actually hide away the fact that there's a blockchain involved for us, or that there's tokens potentially involved, or some of these other things, because actually all that our customers care about, and the individuals that use us, is the data fraud proof? Can I prove very quickly or instantly who said what and when? The answer is yes. Well, then I'm interested. But if we try and put forward the technical workings of our systems as the kind of the sales pitch to people, they're not interested, right. And rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people a lot of the same thing. Is most people don't really care about the technology behind it. Is it on a blockchain? Is it not? They just want to know, does it work? Is it secure? Can I trust it? They don't really care. They just and does it make my life easier? Does it solve a problem that I have? And that's what we've got to focus more on. We've kind of do something similar. We're working on a wallet right now that users can use for really anywhere, but mainly games are starting to integrate them into their gaming platform, to where the user just signs up and doesn't even realize they've spun up a non-custodial wallet. Because one thing we've learned is friction. Is you're trying to get a user into a game from, say, the Web 2 space. They come in and they have to set up a MetaMask, and then they've got to write down their seed phrase. That's all kind of friction that you're losing them. Because most of them aren't going to care that it's that it's a blockchain, that there's assets on chain involved. They don't even care what chain it is. They just want to know, can I get in and play it? And
Exactly.
same thing with users. Can I get in and use this technology? And I mentioned NFTs earlier, and I think that's one of the words that I think is just going to go away. The technology is always going to be a non-fungible token, but most people aren't going to care what that is or even understand it. They just know it's a digital asset. It's a digital membership. It's a digital, and it's something, whether I can transfer it, I can't transfer it, they'll know that it's that and not say, oh, it's an NFT.
I agree. It's almost like we need to get to the point, Wayne, like we all kind of wonder when mass adoption is going to happen, like whatever that means. It'll mean different things to different people. But really to get like, I guess maybe most or a good portion of the internet users using crypto in some way, whether it's like tokens or, something, or credentials or identity or something else. But I think we'll only get there when people don't even know whether it's a Web 2 thing or a Web 3 thing, or they really shouldn't care. Like that's the point where if they can just use it, then it's going to get really big. But whilst we still keep talking about Web 3 and this is a Web 3 thing and this is a Web 2, if it's obvious to people and it's difficult to use, like you say, they're not going to use it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's really what happened with phones. And it doesn't matter how great your technology is. We need a lot more people thinking about that end user experience. I give an example all the time. The big debate on phones here is iPhone or Android. I'm an Android person. And I tell people all the time, Apple doesn't make the best phone. They don't have the best technology out there. But why are they so successful at what they do? And it's centered around ease of use.
Yeah.
Most people don't care about a lot of the technology, the features. They just want to know, is it simple? Can I use it?
And the software is designed around the hardware. Like that's the big thing. Like obviously Android, it's lots of different operating systems, and that's why a lot of people like it, is because it's this kind of open platform. Lots of companies like innovating in the space and using it, but like they're still, the difference in that and Apple is the whole ecosystem's designed for the software and the hardware to run together, which makes it so easy to use. But like you say, it's a pretty closed ecosystem, so it's not for everyone.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool, Nick. So as we start to wrap up, and a lot of great topics we talked on here, man. I think there's so many good sound bites out of here that we'll be able to pull, just because this is what people need to hear. And I always get excited when I talk about utility. And so before we tell everybody where they can find out more about Doc, what are those? We mentioned some different industries, but if we have business owners or business professionals listening to this, what are the types of people that you want to reach out to you, the types of people that would have an interest to get started today and really contact you guys to start working with you?
Yeah, so really any business that's looking to basically prove a piece of data. So example could be like a health and safety training company or an online learning course. So a student could complete a training course, whether it's online or in person. And if that's something that they want to take with them, the completion certificate, and then prove at a later date that they obtained that, that's exactly a really good use case for a doc. Other ones that we see are even like with big companies, like financial service companies, things where you might need to go and complete loan paperwork, Wayne. And there's like 20 million people in America who take out like small loans every year. So they maybe take out $500, $1,000 loans 8 or 12 times a year, and they complete the same forms over and over again each time. But imagine their employer, who has all this verified data about them, like their name, address, how much money they earn, how long they've been there, all the stuff that a financial service company would want. They can package that up as a credential and give that to the employee. And the employee can go to a loan company and say, look at this signed thing that's already verified by my employer. They can get access to loans much more quickly and really better quality loans. So things like financial services, training stuff like I mentioned, and kind of workforce stuff like the health, the kind of medical practitioner, those are the types of industries that we think we can make a big difference.
That's exciting to hear. As I mentioned, we're starting to work with a lot of businesses, even locally, trying to foster adoption by educating them and getting them to start using this technology. And one of the things I mentioned, I'm in Louisiana. I live right outside of New Orleans, and New Orleans has a bit of a tech presence, so there's more tech forward thinking people. where the town I live in outside of New Orleans is more oil field related, and
Okay.
there's not a lot of people that are really thinking like tech forward. And I kind of struggle with that as I talk to people to try to educate them about this space. But safety certifications in the oil field
100%.
is massive. So
Yeah.
that's a real use case that I can point some of these people to. And you want to understand how this technology works, how you can use it here. So
Yeah.
now I know I've got a resource. I can share a doc with them, tell them to connect,
Exactly.
and learn more, because that sounds like it would solve a problem they have, because you have workers here that then may have to go pick up shifts or do some work in Texas or somewhere else where it may be a little bit different, somewhere they're not used to working, and easily be able to verify that someone has the safety credentials they're supposed to have.
Yeah. And it's not like a card. Like in the UK, it's quite commonplace. So if you access a construction site or a mining site or something like that, it's literally a laminated card that anyone could make and anyone could
Here.
change.
Same.
And then they're working in super dangerous environments. So yeah, it's a really good use case.
Yeah. There's a lot of these docks and ports where you got to have certain cards, credentials to get in. You're right. It's just a laminated card that if somebody really wanted to duplicate, it's not. They may have a special hologram, and that's the best they have for security.
Yeah, and how much better is it? Like we all, for the most part, carry smartphones these days. So not. I mean, some environments like Wayne, we've heard stories of people carrying about cardboard folders with their credentials because it's not as nice and neat as a laminated card. But for those people, like imagine just putting it in a credential in a wallet on your phone. Like it's you're carrying it anyway. It's so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, Nick. Well, as we wrap up, tell everybody where they can find out more information about Doc and connect with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, they will do. So main website is doc.io, like you said. A really good place to go for people. We've actually got a no-code solution built. So a big part of us is, like you said, like proving utility, but it's not only for developers. So if you go to search.doc.io, you can actually sign up for like free trial, and then just actually start with our no-code solution, creating decentralized identities and then sending credentials to whoever you want. So that would be a good place to go. I think Twitter is at Doc Network, and you can also sign up to our newsletter on our main website as well.
Awesome. And I'll have all those included in the descriptions below as well. And interesting to hear, I'm actually personally also taking a mental note. I'm going to go and play around with the technology. I love to see use cases like that. I love to see, and then I can add that to my, I guess you could say, my repository of, okay, you want to do this, this is where you need to go for your business.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, any issues, let us know, Wayne. But yeah, hope you enjoy it.
Awesome. I'm excited. I'm glad your team reached out to schedule this interview. I can also think of a few other colleagues I have in the space that have shows, many of them with more followings. They focus on a lot more general knowledge, general information. So love to see you guys out there more.
Please send them our way.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this, make sure to check out doc.io, try it out as Nick mentioned, and try it out for free with their no-code solution, and follow them on socials. One of the biggest things is keeping up with projects that are doing stuff. I mean, this technology is evolving and happening so fast that you want to follow socials just because there may be updates. And Nick, I mean, we may do a follow-up in 6 months or so, and you guys may have more ideas, more products, more solutions coming out. We didn't talk much about it, but I've seen, talking to colleagues in the industry, AI is accelerating their development quite a bit. That's creeping in everywhere.
Yeah, and depending on when you publish this, we've actually got a kind of fairly big announcement coming out in the crypto space. Probably, I mean, timing wise for us, it'll be like mid-July, but I don't know when this will hit. But hopefully people will be hearing a lot more about us.
Yeah, this will be after that. So you guys listen to this. This is already live. Did you want to say a little bit more about that?
No.
Okay. Not yet. Gotcha. So keep an eye out. Gotcha. All right. Understood. All right. Awesome. So Nick, thanks again for your time today. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you sharing all this information with the listeners. Any final words before we cut out?
No, I really appreciate you having me on. I think it's really great what people like you are doing, Wayne, trying to a lot of us are educated about the space, but the only way that we keep growing it is bringing new people in. So all the work you're doing is definitely appreciated by everyone else in the community.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Thanks again, Nick. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.